Mr. Detonicourt, and we're here to discuss the characteristics of life. All living things share some basic properties, including cellular organization, because all living things are made of cells. Reproduction, all living things must reproduce. Metabolism, which means that all living things must obtain energy and use energy. Homeostasis, this means that all living things have to maintain a constant internal environment. One simple example would be like your body temperature, staying stable at around 98.6 degrees. Heredity. We have to pass on our genes because our DNA holds the genetic information that gives us the characteristics that we have. Responsiveness. All organisms respond to their environment in some way. Growth and development. Of course, we know that we grow and we get larger. So do other organisms, plants, animals, and so on. But organisms also develop, which means they change over time as they mature. And they adapt through evolution. So over time, organisms change and become more adapted to their environments. All right, let's take a look at these in a little more detail. The smallest possible living thing is a cell. And a couple of examples of this are bacteria and protists. Here you can see this is a protist called a paramecium. And here we have some bacteria. We can also have multicellular organisms, organisms that are made of many cells, and they have to have specialized cells because it's not just one general cell doing all of the jobs. You need to have a lot of different cells that are capable of doing very specific jobs, which can all help the organism to survive. Here are some plant cells. And here are the inside of a plant cell. You can see that there are a lot of what we call organelles, little organelles that can do specific jobs to help the cell to survive. All living things reproduce. So there are a couple of ways you can reproduce. Or some organisms reproduce asexually, and some reproduce sexually. In this case, we have a single parent, and it reproduces by cell division. So you can see here this cell divided into another cell. That's asexual reproduction. In sexual reproduction, we have two different parent organisms, and they contribute their own genetic information. This involves a male and a female sex cell. So typically mating. In the case of plants, you could just have one parent, but still two different sex cells. All living things obtain and use energy. Living organisms need energy to grow, develop, repair damage, and to reproduce. Basically, you need energy for all of your life functions. There are two ways of looking at energy in an organism's body. One is called anabolism, and that's the process of building up complex substances from simpler substances. Building up cells and cellular components, and photosynthesis. So photosynthesis is anabolism because this leaf can capture sunlight, use the energy from the sunlight to produce sugars, which is food for the plant. So it's building a new molecule from the carbon dioxide from the air and from the energy from the sunlight. It can make sugars. On the opposite side of that, we have catabolism. And that's a process of breaking down complex substances into simpler substances to release energy. This would be like digestion and cellular respiration. So when you eat food, you digest it, and it goes into your bloodstream and it goes to all the cells of your body. Your cells can then use those simple sugars as a source of energy by doing a process called cellular respiration. And it breaks down that sugar and it uses it for energy. It makes ATP molecules which your cell can use to do work. Metabolism. This is the total of all of the chemical reactions in your body or in an organism's body. It includes the anabolism plus the catabolism. So basically an easy way to think about this is all of the chemical reactions in your body in subtotal become your metabolism. So you're constantly using energy to do your body's work, and therefore you have to constantly take in energy to replace that. All organisms maintain homeostasis, and that is how the organism's body maintains a constant internal environment. Things like body temperature, blood volume, pH balance, water balance, and if any of these things were to really go out of whack, it could mean serious problems for the organism. So even with body temperature, if your body temperature even goes up a fairly small amount, you could get very sick, fever, and possibly even die. Same thing with pH balance. Your blood has a fairly constant pH. If you were to do something like binge drink and really tax your system, you could actually change your pH so much it can kill you, and that's a big problem with alcohol poisoning. All organisms pass along hereditary traits. Genes carry hereditary information. Genes are composed of DNA, and heredity is the reason children resemble their parents. There can be mutations to DNA, and those mutations can also be passed on to the next generation. All living things respond to their environment. Organisms react to stimuli such as light, temperature, odor, sound, gravity, heat, and water, and pressure. Here in this example, we typically don't think of plants as moving very much, or they don't move around like animals do, but really they do respond to their environment, and they tend to grow toward the sunlight. So they are aware of their environment and they can react to it. All organisms grow. That's pretty obvious. Every living thing that you see, you can probably think of as having grown. And then they develop, which means that they change over time. So like an example of a butterfly changing from a caterpillar changing into a butterfly. But even with something like a human, obviously you go through different stages of development, from an infant to a toddler to a child to an adolescent to an adult and to a senior citizen. All living things adapt to their environment through evolution. So adaptations is a process that enables organisms to become better suited to their environment. Organisms have a lot of different characteristics, what we call variations. And when one of these variations actually helps an organism to survive in the environment that it's in, it can become an adaptation. And adaptations are very important for helping organisms to survive in very different environments. Species obtain these adaptations through evolution over great periods of time. And here are just some time periods. The Earth is pretty old, and organisms have had a long time to adapt over these years. An example of an adaptation is this cactus has to adapt to living in a very dry environment, and so it's developed a waxy coating to help it conserve water. Also, the spines on the cactus have developed to help protect it from predators that would eat the cactus.